So today I would like to give a presentation about two new commissions to explain about my thought, about my materials that I'm very excited to work with them in this afternoon. So yeah, let me just share my screen. So this is, I call this presentation as Transition in Tradition because I can see that this is a special pieces because I have been working a lot with traditional material, which put in a contemporary context, and then which has two pieces, like one is for solo shamisen and another one is for the shamisen ensemble. So I think it's a very special pieces where I can, show you some of my scores, my soundscapes, like thoughts, so then we can explore together with the performer as well. It's a little bit unfortunate that today our performers cannot attend, so I just kind of like make some mock-up sounds that we will try something together later. So that's a kind of introduction. So I have been, working with Rico Fujiwara and also like talking with Rio Hasegawa about how to write for shamisen. So we have been, doing several sessions, talking about notation, talking about the history of the shamisen, which makes me feel very excited about because shamisen means 3 strings instrument, right? Which kind of, if we compare to some other other Eastern traditional instrument, in Thai we also have some instrument and we call them in as like 1 string instrument, 2 string instrument as well. So I can see that there's some kind of like relation between of the culture in terms of like even like the title of the instrument. So I would like to just give some credits before we move on. Like, thank you very much everyone for being in this session. So yeah, let's talk about tradition. So like I mentioned before about comparison between Asian instruments, which make me feel I'm really comfortable in writing because I start to know how the system works. Like for example, the strings that each strings has a different like pitches and how we can incorporate some techniques. Like for example, tremolo, glissando. Like I mean, this is kind of like westernized way to explain, but actually in tradition itself, they already have that kind of technique. So I just want to show like some excerpt from the piece called Sureru, which is a solo, like it's a funny word because like so in Japanese, like correct me if I'm wrong, real, like my understanding, like Sureru means something like slide, like slide. I cannot do like Japanese accent, but so like I have been thinking about the gestures, like thinking about how to incorporate traditional techniques like of sure. I don't know, I just thinking about like slide, and then it starts from like something very simple, that just glissando up and glissando down, like from the the lowest strings position to the highest position, and then it just start to kind of granulate to other techniques and other gesture like tremolo. So this is a kind of setup that I ask, like because like usually the tuning of the shamisen is like C G C or like D G D. So then I asked the Rico to tune a little bit, like to become like C sharp, G sharp, and then C. So we have 3 like open string. Let's say like when we don't have to press anything, we're gonna get this main chord, and then we start to incorporate 2 strings, which is one and the first and second string as the grace note, and then go start with the 3rd string, the highest string, from the highest pitch to the lowest pitch. So this is a kind of like actually traditional in Western notation as well, but we can hear a kind of the spectrum of sound that vibrant between three strings. And then another gesture that I use it a lot in my pieces. So it's just kind of like repeating, sliding, bouncing, spinning, hocketing. I don't know, like it's just like a lot of my music. I use that to incorporate the work. And then this is one more example that include the way that we, when we pluck one time and then we keep sliding. So it's kind of like, immediately kind of like echo, right? Like boom. So like I kind of like interested in using these traditional techniques actually, because like I always disobey probably some of you don't know some of my work, so like I just kind of like reject everything from traditions, like not everything, I mean like sometimes, but then like this time that's why I said it's special, because I kind of like use the traditional sense of material to incorporate in the piece. So like from these 5 gestures, so I just want to show you the scores that I have been working. So as you can see, don't worry, this is my copyright, I hope. So I don't put copyright, but I have my name in there, so that should be good. So like as you can see, like Sureru, like about the sliding, and then so I try to, it's about cultural barriers. So like when I have to work with Rico, who knows like pretty good about Western notation, and I just feel like I want to notate in this way, because I could ask anyone from traditional musician to translate to be a Japanese notation for me, So, but that's why I put this, because it's kind of like easier for me to communicate with people. Or I could even see that maybe it could transcribe to other string instruments, and then we can hear a different qualities of sound. But for now, I'm kind of like interested in how, repetition works, right? Like when we hear a lot of like shamisen music, we hear a lot of like repetition, like a lot of like repeats, kind of like it's not repeat as minimal music, but repeat because you must hear the sound, otherwise you don't understand what's going on. So I just like start to like incorporate this to have more kind of like attractive motion, like simple, like up down up down up down up down down up down up down up down, and then I start to have some kind of like contrast, which we can actually hear from the beginning when they have like grace note with this like C sharp, but then once you do tremolo, so you can hear the echoes, and then it start to kind of like merge. I also thinking about that this is kind of like sound painting, that you hear kind of like different pitches and different motions, which kind of like combine and create the whole sonic experience. So after kind of like how to say, constant rhythm, right? 4/4. So 12/16 somehow. This is a bit Western anyway. So, but then like kind of like I start to think about how to make the rhythm is more interesting, like by making them like more concise. Like for example, 6/16 is kind of like we miss 1/16 note, right? So like we kind of start kind of like incorporate them together, and have some kind of contrast with the tremolo. Yep, and start to be more developed, like in terms of materials, that you can see more jumping notes, or like which makes you hear more different kind of sounds. And then the music start getting more intense, like with like different kind of like pushing like dynamic. As you can see, they have a lot of energy, like mwah, 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 right? So I just kind of like interested in this motion, which I use in some other pieces too. And then so apart from that, gradually faster. And then, like from this accelerando, it just like go to this form of like, like some people like, oh, you're copying and paste, but no, actually no, because we need you to hear this amazing sound, like bang, 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 like it's amazing sound. And when you hear it in a different time, like when it's slower, when it's faster, when it's gradually move, it's a very fascinating for me. And also like with several dynamics. So, yep. So just go to the second section. This is a bit more cheesy. I usually don't write music like this, but I just feel like this year I kind of like wants to do something that I don't get used to it. So yeah, it's more melodic, it's more kind of harmonic, more developed in terms of like, I mean, um rhythms or like the motion. So it makes Rico, like who is the soloist, like make more sounds, like and think about how to create her own version. Like for example, if she does this gesture, maybe she could add one note, or she could just play 4 notes as written. But then she could also make some like unexpected vibrato, like kind of vibration that make the piece more interesting. And this is a kind of motion that I kind of like it, because like just start to pluck one time, but when you keep sliding, so the sound itself will be gone very quickly, because it's like you damp the sound, but you can hear like kind of like echoing, you know so yeah, so I just kind of experimenting with a kind of like different range. As you can see, it's kind of up like 2 octaves higher, and then start to rubato, melodious vibrato. So yeah, so just like kind of like more intensity, more personal, like so I would this I even say like please this melody freely. I mean, like I usually don't do this, but um I just feel like it would be nice to have the performer bring traditionality into the contemporary piece. So yeah, so this is a kind of like basic general idea, and then we just go to more repetition, but in a different context, like different pitches, different motions, different time signatures, and then it start to get more like to be more. Oh, sorry, there's some stucking. Okay, this is kind of last page, like fast slide, of course. The faster, the better. Somehow, in so like usually in my music, like getting more excitement, more energy, like since we accumulate a lot of form, energetic movement, like that brings the music to the end. So as you can see, that there's a lot of like improvisation, not a lot, sorry, like slightly improvisation from a lot of notes. So I would even say heat, like sometimes it's just the way that I write music, like if I want the music sounds like bird, so it's just like bird like, like I can feel the heat, because like the performer must like physicality must be very tiring. And I know that, but I like it. And I hope she would enjoy it as well, even though it's a bit pain. But then, yeah, the heat will make the music very fun, I think. So this is a kind of first piece that I would like to introduce. And oh, the sound. I mean, I know like I don't like MIDI, like I don't like sampling a lot, like when I do electronic music, like I mean like electronic sampling, but um like like the performer couldn't come today, so I just at least just for a kind of like a guidance, Yep. So that's the first piece, Sureru, that I was talking about the tradition part, you know. And then the second part is quite interesting because I think this piece I kind of start to think about transition, like from tradition to something more contemporary. So yeah, so this is a piece for the ensemble. So it's named Guragura. So it's kind of like quake, something like tremor, something like shaking. I actually have one piece before 3 years ago. I call it Tremor of Love. It was a piece written for um my friend Nopakorn and Kurt for the guitar and piano. So the piece kind of that piece kind of like focus on the vibration of the string sound and the keyboard sound. Like, sorry, I just like randomly, you know, tremolo on the glass table. But then yeah, so like from that point, so I found that I notated everything. Probably Nopakon you remember. So everything was like very precise in terms of even the granulation of sound with the vibration. But then I was thinking like, hey, maybe I should take the idea from that piece to make it more how to say, more flexible. I like to hear the tremolo sound more flexible, more kind of have more continuation of sound. And then yeah, probably it's kind of like Easter eggs if you know some, anime. So yeah, that's the devil fruit. And then yeah, so the piece focus on the physicality of musical elements, like what I learned from the tradition part, like the sureru, like from like, there's a lot of like motion, right? Like glissando, up, down, you know, the right hand, left hand. That's a lot of like elements of physicality. So I just was thinking like starting with the simple material from like tremolo, right? And then how I can incorporate more or expand or extend or you know kind of thinking about this material as a gum, right? As a kind of like how we stretch it, and then it still stick together. So I come up with idea of tremor sound that have three types of thoughts, which is continuation, granulation, and vibration, which create the physicality of the performers as well. Like when they have to use the fingers to, like do a very fast gestures. So it create a kind of like the more they have, the more fun actually. Like like when we have one person, maybe he or she or they get tired. But then when we have more than 10 people to play this piece, then they can share the pain. Am I right to say like then they can share the tiredness, like some of them can start to feel like, oh, I will slow down, but some of them like, oh, I will be faster. But then it's a kind of like kind of randomness of layers from only one the one material. So here it's just like I was thinking about, like transit from traditional tuning to the new tuning, and then there must be some kind of like um unfamiliar hearing experience of performers, because usually traditional musician, I can see too, like sometimes maybe they get used to the way that they um change the tuning all the time, like while playing with another hand, right? So it's a kind of like illusion now, and that I think it creates a kind of like you know um perception of hearing to be more like, oh, is that the right pitch or not, or should I that's I like this because that's the meaning of gura, right? It's like something like shaking, something like unstable, something like unpredictable. Like, so that's something I looking for apart from sound, which is the expression, like the, how to say, that's an in English word, the awareness of physicality, like how they think about fingerings, how they think about, oh, what they have to do with left hand. Maybe they're shaking, like, oh, I might count the right bars, something like that. It's kind of like funny, but I feel like that's the part of art, right? Like where we don't know what's going on. COVID happened, no one know before, right? So everything is unstable. So everything is gura in some way. So like I was thinking about like traditional process in sound, like as I mentioned before, there's a lot of instability that happen in like shaking. And then I'm thinking about the transition process. Like for example, one unstable sound, let's say one shaking sound, it goes through more gestures. Like for example, the grease, but still tremolo. But don't worry, the whole piece is the tremolo. So tremolo with some some material from Sureru, like the little grace note, some accidental crescendo diminuendo. Like this is kind of traditional materials, but I just want them to be special, like in this way, sometime with the um kind of static glissando, which create melody like dee 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 dee, something like that, right? But then it's kind of like still rumbling, right? And then or like they can pick each, like when I put the so I will show you the score soon. Like when I put the comma, it means like they can pick the pitch individually, then they can do in any orders in the period of time. So then it depends on the decision of performers to pick their own transition to create the composition. So that's a general idea of Guragura. And then apart from the process of material, I've been talking a lot about performance process as well, which is I make it into a triangle way, not triangle love, but triangle way. So like I start with the unison, which is like everyone do the same thing, right? So I also like, I mean, sorry, like if I put some boring English, but I just find that the more I do score like with a lot of clear English, that would help me to, I mean, it reminds me, like what I should do. So if it's too boring for you, so I apologize that, but I promise you it's going to be a special piece. So then unison will grow up, to a kind of like lead follow. Like for example, like they would, the whole ensemble will read the same lines, which I will show you in a bit. So then they start to think about the lead, how to follow their leaders, right? Like if someone start to change, another person will have right to say, right to think and play like, okay, I'm not gonna follow you, but then I'm gonna follow someone else who still maintain the pitches. We will go to the score, okay? And then individual. So I do on my own. So it's kind of like I just feel like this process reflect a lot about social identity of like normal society. Like for example, like unison, like like especially, I mean, I think about this because like Thailand, Japan, we have kind of like we have different culture, of course, but we still have kind of Asian spirit, like we do something together as unison. We have some kind of leader, follow them, and some of us just like very individualistic, like I gonna do this I don't care. So I just want to have these three behaviors of performance into the piece. For example, I put like S.G.1, which is mean Shamisen group 1. So the whole piece has two groups. Like the first line, you just do unison, like tremolo with plectrum as fast as possible for 8 seconds in this part. And then another 8 seconds, which is the 16th second. And another 4 seconds, which is the 20th second here. So as you can see, like the group 1 start first, and they have to do like together, like from like very, very soft. And then group 2 come in a different layers of dynamic, because the first people, they already start to grow, right? Thinking about nature, right? Like it's like flower is blooming, right? In a different layer. So it's a unison in a different layers. Second one, sorry, I just put individual first. So they start to do Guragura behavior by their own with various dynamics as possible. They can pick the strings. They can either listen to some people and then make it different. So the point of this game is to not be the same with other people, right? Because like the unison already make you feel, homogeneous, but right now make you feel individual. And then the third one, just like this is easy, like lead follow, the first person start to please, and then the rest of people start to follow. So become like a waves, right? Thinking about student sport day, right? When they have to do like hula hula ha ha ha, right? I'm sorry if this presentation is not too academic, but I think this is the way that so then like you start to follow your friend, right? You start to follow the leader, the cheerleaders, right? So you start to follow, like voice, you start to follow the action. So I'm thinking about that a lot in particularly in this piece. So it's gonna create kind of like waves, that make different layers and sound outcome. And then this is a kind of like some other part that be more specific. For example, just the plucking or just like slamming the strings, sforzando, sforzando, and with some like unison like clicks together, something like kind of I just kind of start to see two groups become more interact, like so like this group as a person say 3 notes, and then this person as a group respond with glees. It's kind of like, hey, yeah, hey, okay, hey, okay, I got it. I'm sorry, this is a bit cheesy to explain, but sometimes the music itself create conversation. Like I would call it an imaginary conversation that without any clue, So yeah, I just like put like, for example, 12/4, like 12 beats, repeat twice, and then I always put the time, because we work with time, and it's only a particular part that I need it to be very rhythmical, and because like other parts, it's quite very kind of, very horizontal. So this is the only part that I want. And here, this is kind of like the end, like almost reaching 80% of the piece. So the two groups start to merge. That's why I just put S.G. plus 1 plus 2. And then, they start to, being a kind of strong chord together. Start from like strong tremolo, and then rhythmical pop, 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 pop. So like to show the social impact, the social consequences that they become kind of unique Guragura. I don't know, is it cheesy to say? But then, yeah, they start to kind of like lead, follow, start to separate again. Yep. So before we go talking, I just want to show you the score. So this is the how it looks like. So I just want the score make sure it's clear in terms of timing as much as possible. So then I just put here, the time, and then the way that I think about the tremolo, how to rejoin them together. Sometimes I have also hit the chord together, something like that. And then, it start to kind of like more become a dialogue between two groups, and then become holy dialogues, right? Like there are more people talking, more people kind of like sharing their sounds through the triangle methods that I mentioned before. And yeah, and then like we just and this is very unlikely me, but I feel like maybe I need some calm for my music too. It was funny, like I looked up my website like just last week, and I had about like 100 pieces with like 80 or 90 recordings, which I proud very much in the 10 years work, and then but then I have a lot of fast pieces, but then I think I should have kind of more calmness too. So I think this piece is quite very calm in like comparing to other of my catalog. Yeah, so that's a kind of like thing. And then I have some kind of, so don't trust this MIDI. Okay, this is not the best way to represent, but we don't have the people right now to play for you for real. But this is the general idea. Oh, this is granulation, by the way. Just like, thinking about the shaking sound, right? So I just put a sample of like MIDI shamisen, and then I just like start to repeat them in the way that tremolo would do. So that's kind of like electronic version. Probably I should do an electronic version for the piece then. But I actually prefer. I mean, I have been working with this, but I actually prefer more the real sound. Like because like there's a lot of joyfulness. There's a lot of, like I said before, like the physicality, like of the piece that performers express to their um, pieces. I mean, sorry, my pieces, but like to their method of performance, the triangle. So like I just feel like it's kind of more fun, But of course, you can also hear this kind of harmony in this is the actual harmony anyway. So you will hear these pitches. So, but at least something, So yeah, so let's talk about it. We have time until 45, right? So let's just, go to the discussion. Like maybe you can talk any panel you think about my pieces. What do you think, or any errors that you catch from the scores, or or feel free to let's talk. We have about like 7-8 minutes, right? Yeah. Yes, Tanakan.
Yeah, hi, good piece. I actually have a question. I look at the score. I noticed like you didn't change a lot of pictures and materials. Also, like from regular conversation yesterday, is it because the performers of the group, they can not all of them can read um, the Western notation. So when you choose to have like the same pictures like all over the place, is it like you expect that some of them who can read the Western notation would teach that part to the rest of the group, or so, you get what I mean, right? Like that kind of context, like one or two or three people, like kind of like
Yeah,
delivering the information.
Thanks, Tanaka. And that's a very good practical question because I'm happy that you asked this. So basically, like, let's say this. First, I had an experience working with Thai performers, in my recent piece called Garden, which is I work with two traditional Thai performers. They're amazing performers, but they don't read Western notation. I was like, oh, okay. I spent like 2 weeks, wrote the piece in this kind of like even more rhythmical. But then because we are Thai people always say yes first, right? I asked them before, like, hey, do you think you can make it like reading this notation? They said yes, yes. And I like the spirit, I love the spirit. But then what we did after that is just like we talk verbally, we start to get a piece of paper, and then to schedule down like what would be good sounds or what would be good textures. And actually I would say 70% accurate from my initial score, which is pretty impressive. Like because like we have different methods of working now, like apart from like having score, but then talking. So what I imagine that for this piece and for Otoha group, there are a few people who read music, and especially Rio will conduct the piece. So Rio will, I'm sure that he will guide the performer. Like for example, here, this is the first bar, second, third, right? So that would be very, very cool. That it will communicate well. But then we already talked about it. Like after the performance of the piece, I will work with Rico to translate this into a Japanese notation version. So like I know that it wouldn't change things that much, but at least it's a good archive, like to, for example, if someone wants to write something for Shamisen, so then they can look up to the material that we have, But at the same time, I think for me, if I have one wish for make the world better, I would just hope everyone talk the same language, so then we can have the same. No, of course we will find like different language, and maybe I would renounce it. I hope everyone in the world can speak all languages. So like at least, maybe 3 or 4. Okay, I start to change my words now, but this is what I think. Like, so then they will start to share. For example, they will learn. I think they will learn like start from like play together with unison. That's the reason I make the triangle. Like, so they start something together first, and then they start to like lead follows, and then they start to be individual. So yeah, I think that's a kind of general like answer for you, like for practicality. Of course, in the rehearsal, I'm sure Real will manage it, like how to understand this kind of notation. Sorry, if I move, is it loud? Okay. I try not to move, okay? So yeah, that's kind of like practical things. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments?
Thank you so much, Tanakan, for introducing the question about notation and from Western tradition. And thank you so much, Piyawat, to sharing and explaining about your piece and how you communicate with tradition performer Shamisen. I think it it's different tradition. Like you use some kind like a Western thing that had a long tradition as well, and also the Shamisen, they have their own tradition too. But in terms of like a compositional technique in Western notation, like Piyawat, you have been developing, and like from your working with tradition player Shamisen like Rico and others, like from your working together, how did you find out that working with this tradition instrument in terms of making Western notation? How do you develop like your compositional technique from your working together?
Oh, thank you very much. I think that's a very personal question, and I'm very happy to talk about it. So, basically, my music, I always take small things and to make it bigger. This is like it's kind of like Beethoven in the way, right? It's kind of like Germanic, Austrian, I don't know, like kind of like European, I would say, like create one thing and keep focus on it, right? So for me, I treat shamisen as tubes. I treat tubes as violin. I treat violin as computer. So for me, I focus on the thing called object or instruments or tools or as a part of my techniques. So this is the way I always work. So like, for example, as you know already, like many of my music have a lot of tremolo or a lot of like vibration or continuation. Sometimes it was funny, like last week I got an email from a museum that will exhibit my work, and then I send them some of my pieces, and then they say like, Piyawat, we are very happy to program your works in the museum, but it is a little bit of sinister. I love the word, like sinister, like, this is like, what is that? Is it Marvel comic, like Sinister 7 or something? Dr. Octopus or something? But I mean, maybe that would be my new piece, for sinister things. But so I would say that to answer your question more correctly is that so I try to extend the identity of the materials I have, like in a very narrow way. Actually, I try not to do, I not try to fantasize the drama, let's say, of the instrument, but rather than extend the possibility of the materials. Like if I want to do tremolo, how many types of tremolo that I could make, and I wouldn't use all of them. I would just pick carefully depending on the context of the piece. For example, this piece, I think about the traditionality. So I try to follow tradition, to be honest, this piece. I try to be with the traditions, but then a little bit of myself inside and start to reflect. Like, for example, a lot of shamisen traditional music, there's a lot of repetition and then kind of scalar motion, right? Right. I do everything that they do, but then just everything tremolo. So it's just like kind of like focus more in the way that simple, but also I want to make sure that this material is very, very important, the Guragura. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Piyawat, for your wonderful presentation. I hope you can hear me well for now. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled to sort of finally get to work your piece for the first time. I mean, we've been working together for quite some time, and this is sort of the first time that I get to sort of work, your piece, and I'm totally enjoying this process, especially the one that you wrote for Japanese instruments. And then I think Tanaka sort of brought up the more practical question before, but this Shamisen Ensemble Otoha is an amateur group. Most of the members started learning shamisen once they got into college, but they are super professional, and they're excellent ensemble. It's one of the leading ensembles in Japan. So all the consideration for that Piyawat, I see that everything on the score, and then we talked about notation. You use a lot of open strings, which is, for them makes it much easier to follow. And it's easier and flexible for them to do, glissando and then other technique, tremolo and stuff. One question that I have about this piece, Piyawat, is the use of ma, the silence. The Japanese composer Takemitsu, talks a lot about this conflict between silence and noise in Japanese music, or Japanese, his music. And then I found one particular silence that I found very, very powerful, which is the very end of the piece of Guragura. You have 15 seconds of silence. But apart from that, you don't have real essence.
Yeah, here, right?
What? In this piece, did you have some intentional use of ma for this piece?
Can you? Yeah, sure. I'm happy to answer. Would you remind me again which place? I can share my screen once again.
Yeah, this is the very end of the piece. Yes.
This one?
Yes. So that is a particularly very powerful, because, like I said, there is not really a moment of sort of stillness in this piece from the beginning until you get to the point. There's always this tremolo going on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for raising that. So first, so we had so many sounds. We had so much sounds during the piece, right? So I think that's a moment to have a rest. And also, if they just stop and then start to move, I think it kind of destroy the whole thing that they built before. It's like they built, and then there's a lot of reverb. You see, I had some pause as well. So I think that answer, it's nice to have some time to feel like, oh, the piece has aim, and also I think that, but thank you for raising that. I appreciate. I just also want to say that it's actually start to something of that here too, something like a lot of sound and then less and less. So it's like breathing, right? It's like the motion, that the behaviors of human, right? Sometimes like a lot of sound, and it's time to go, right? So I think that's a kind of like, but thank you. It is one of the place that I think is quite important for the piece. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so any more questions from the panels? Okay, so
Yes.
Piyawat,
So
do
if you
you want to say anything
yeah,
more?
yeah, sure. I mean, so that's just the part, you know, the presentation is not a complete part, you know, of the work anyway. So I just maybe I can just show you a little bit of the, you know, the scores and the way that I use the material, you know. So let's just start. I mean, I feel it's a shame that I have to do this as a MIDI, you know, but I think that would be excitement. So here, so for example, so we have the first chord, right? So we have the first chord. Sorry, I just tried to. Then let's put delay off. You see, so like we have kind of like unison of tremolo, like kind of like a big clouds, and then we have kind of like vertical stop, like when they just do plucking together. I think it's kind of like visually and sonically powerful in the way. And then after that, so they just so they just start to, you know, to rejoin. Yep. So like, you know, like I was I was doing myself by my fingers, so maybe it's not a good explanation. But as you can see, this is a kind of like, you know, general idea that once they start to kind of like grease, you know, or like change the pitch, or so it's kind of like sonic activities, you know, that it create the more like highest pitches, like, so you're gonna hear the wide range of the shamisen, you know, like for example, and then you can even hear I do this because like everyone not gonna do the same plucking, right? So you will hear this kind of sound collide all the time. So and then it start to move to another chords in sometime later, you know, and then it start to getting more intense, as you can see here, you know, and like I'm the most interested thing that I like to explore with them is that if they make mistakes or if they make something apart from what I have written, that would be interesting too, you know. But I mean, at least right now we already have a container, we have a form, we have a kind of like complete structure. So then they start to just, you know, little improvise, start to think about, you know, the gesture, texture. So I think that would be the score looks simple, but I think the sound will be very complex in my mind. I think like it's gonna be either very interesting or messy interesting. You know, it's gonna be a lot of like, you know, Guragura behavior. So yeah, so that's I think that's the general thoughts I have for the piece.